The courtroom was tense. The usual murmur of whispered conversations had faded into an uneasy silence. Eyes were glued to the judge, a man of unyielding authority, known for his sharp tongue and even sharper rulings. But today, his gaze was fixed on one person, Elon Musk. Musk, dressed in his usual black suit and crisp white shirt, sat at the defendant's table, his fingers steepled in front of him, his expression as unreadable as ever. He had become accustomed to the spotlight. After all, this wasn't the first time he'd faced intense scrutiny. It wasn't even the first time he was in a courtroom. But something about today felt different. There was an air of unpredictability, a sense that this encounter would be more than just another legal battle. The judge's voice broke the silence, deep and commanding. "Mr. Musk, I'm going to ask you one more time to refrain from speaking out of turn. Your comments have crossed the line between constructive criticism and blatant disrespect." Musk didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, his piercing eyes locked onto the judge. "With all due respect, Your Honor, I'm just stating the facts," he said, his tone calm, yet defiant. "The truth doesn't have to be pleasant for anyone to hear." The judge's face hardened. He had dealt with many high-profile figures before, but none had been as openly rebellious as Musk. This man, this billionaire, seemed to think he was above the law, above respect, above the rules of the courtroom. And that, the judge could not tolerate. "You'll have plenty of time to state your facts after I finish speaking, Mr. Musk," the judge snapped, his gavel slamming down with a force that echoed through the room. "If you continue to interrupt, I will hold you in contempt of court." The tension in the room thickened. This wasn't just a case about business practices or corporate responsibility anymore. This was personal. The judge, with his years of experience in the legal world, had seen many high-powered individuals come and go. But none of them had dared to challenge him so openly, with such little regard for his authority. Musk's lips twitched into a faint smile. It was the kind of smile that hinted at something deeper, something that no one in the room could quite decipher. It wasn't arrogance, it was something else. Confidence, maybe. But also a quiet, unspoken challenge. The air crackled with the impending confrontation. The judge's voice cut through the room again, colder this time. "I'm giving you one last warning, Mr. Musk. Either you cooperate, or I will remove you from this courtroom." Musk straightened up in his chair, his eyes never leaving the judge's face. "I don't think that will be necessary, Your Honor," he said, his voice calm but with a note of finality. "I'm just here to make my case, like everyone else. But it seems you have a problem with that. Tell me, Judge, why is that? What are you afraid of?" The room held its breath. The judge paused, his lips tight. There was something unsettling in Musk's words, something that struck a chord deep within him. He wasn't sure why, but the challenge in Musk's question left him unsettled. And yet, in the same breath, the judge couldn't let it slide. He had to regain control. "You're pushing it, Mr. Musk," the judge said, his voice tinged with an icy warning. "Your behavior will not be tolerated in my courtroom." Musk leaned back in his chair, his gaze still unwavering. "I'm not here to behave, Judge. I'm here to change things." The courtroom gasped. Was he really going there? Was Musk challenging the very foundation of the legal system, the authority of the judge himself? At that moment, the audience could feel the shift. It wasn't just a legal battle unfolding, it was a battle of wills, a clash of two powerful forces. One had the weight of the law behind him, the other had the weight of public opinion and an empire that seemed invincible. The judge raised his gavel again, ready to bring the hammer down with the force of finality. But just before he could strike, Musk spoke again, this time, his words were more deliberate, more pointed. "You're angry because you think you can control me, Your Honor," Musk said, his voice low but carrying through the silence. "But you can't. You're not the only one who plays by the rules. I play by my own rules. And trust me, I've never been more prepared for a fight." The judge's hand faltered midair. Musk's words had struck a nerve. For a brief, heart-stopping moment, the room was quiet, as if the very walls of the courtroom were holding their breath. The weight of the situation had shifted. Musk wasn't just defending himself anymore. He was attacking. But it wasn't just a legal case anymore. It wasn't just about the law. Musk was turning this courtroom into a stage, a spectacle, and the world was watching. As the judge lowered his gavel, signaling the start of another round of legal arguments, there was no denying the undeniable truth: this was no ordinary trial. And Elon Musk was no ordinary defendant. What's your take on Musk's defiance in court? Would you stand up to authority like he does? Drop a comment with your thoughts, and don't forget to hit subscribe. This story is just getting started. Where do you think this battle is headed next? Elon Musk had never been one to follow the traditional path. Born in Pretoria, South Africa, in 1971, he was a child of contradictions, quiet, introspective, yet bursting with ideas that seemed to spring from some unknown, limitless well of curiosity. His early life was marked by isolation. Musk wasn't like the other kids. While his peers played sports or watched television, he buried his nose in books, soaking up everything from comic books to science fiction, philosophy to physics. His mind raced ahead of his years, and his classmates found it hard to relate to him. It wasn't long before he became the target of relentless bullying. But while others saw his eccentricities as weaknesses, Musk saw them as his greatest strengths. His ability to think differently, to challenge conventional wisdom, became the cornerstone of his future. By the time Musk was 12 years old, he had already taught himself programming and created a video game called Blaster, which he sold for $500. It was a small achievement, but it gave him the confidence to think bigger. He knew he wasn't like the other kids. He wasn't destined to sit in a classroom, cramming for tests and following the crowd. No, Elon Musk was destined to change the world. At the age of 17, Musk moved to Canada, choosing to attend Queen's University over South Africa's mandatory military service. He later transferred to the University of Pennsylvania, where he earned degrees in both economics and physics. It was during these years that the idea of using technology to push humanity forward truly took hold. Musk wasn't content with just being a successful entrepreneur. He wanted to revolutionize entire industries and, in doing so, leave a lasting mark on the world. After a brief stint at Stanford University for a PhD in physics, Musk dropped out to pursue a career in business, a decision that would change the course of his life. He founded Zip2, an online software company aimed at helping newspapers build their online presence. It wasn't a massive hit at first, but Musk's relentless drive kept him pushing forward. In 1999, Compaq acquired Zip2 for nearly $300 million, and Musk's first fortune was born. But Elon Musk wasn't interested in resting on his laurels. He moved on to his next venture, X.com, which later became PayPal, revolutionizing online payments. This was only the beginning. The young entrepreneur was just getting started. With his newfound wealth, Musk turned his attention to the stars, quite literally. In 2002, he founded SpaceX with the goal of reducing space transportation costs and making space exploration more accessible. It was a lofty ambition, one that many industry experts had deemed impossible. But Musk wasn't deterred. He poured his money, energy, and determination into making SpaceX a success, despite facing setback after setback. There were numerous failed rocket launches, and many believed that Musk's dream would fizzle out like so many before it. But Musk's belief in his vision was unwavering. And after years of struggle, SpaceX succeeded, becoming the first privately funded company to send a spacecraft to the International Space Station. His success in space was followed by his leadership in the electric car industry, where he transformed Tesla from an experimental startup into a global giant, proving that electric vehicles could be both desirable and practical. By 2025, Musk had become one of the richest individuals on the planet, the driving force behind Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, and the Boring Company. But for all his wealth and accolades, Musk's path had never been easy. He had faced criticism at every turn, both for his brash personality and his relentless pursuit of seemingly impossible goals. To many, he was a visionary, to others, a reckless billionaire who had no respect for the status quo. But to Elon Musk, none of that mattered. What mattered was the goal. The mission. The idea that humanity could be better, smarter, and more efficient, and that he could help lead the way. And that was the driving force behind his defiance. He didn't just want to change the world, he wanted to leave behind a legacy that would challenge future generations to think bigger, to dream more audaciously, and to never be satisfied with mediocrity. Musk's reputation as a disruptor was cemented not just by his success, but by his willingness to challenge authority. Whether it was a confrontation with government regulators, a dispute with rivals, or a verbal sparring match with the media, Musk was known for pushing boundaries and calling out those who stood in his way. His Twitter account, infamous for its blunt and often controversial statements, had become an extension of his public persona. It wasn't just a social media profile, it was a battleground where Musk waged war against anyone who dared to question him. For Musk, it wasn't just about winning. It was about showing that his ideas were unstoppable, even if it meant challenging the very systems that had been built to control people like him. And now, here he was, sitting in a courtroom, staring down a judge who, in Musk's mind, represented everything that was wrong with the system. The courtroom was no place for him to conform to the rules, no place to sit quietly and follow orders. He wasn't about to play the game by anyone else's rules. He was here to change the game. Elon Musk wasn't afraid of the judge. He wasn't afraid of the legal system. And he certainly wasn't afraid of what people thought of him. Because at the end of the day, Musk knew something that few others understood: he didn't need anyone's approval. Not the judges. Not the media's. Not even the public's. All he needed was his vision, and the unshakable belief that the world could be reshaped by the ideas he dared to pursue. As he sat in that courtroom, the tension between him and the judge was palpable. But deep down, Musk was certain of one thing: no one, no matter how powerful, could silence him. Not now. Not ever. The following morning, the tension from the previous day's hearing hung heavily in the air as Elon Musk walked into the courtroom. The judge was already seated, his expression hard as stone, and the lawyers on both sides were ready for battle. Musk could feel the weight of the situation, but he remained cool and composed, as he always did in moments of high pressure. This wasn't his first high-stakes encounter, and it certainly wouldn't be his last. As the gavel struck, signaling the start of proceedings, Musk could sense that this trial was going to be different. The usual court drama, arguments over evidence, lengthy debates over legal technicalities, was still present, but there was something more at play. This was about more than just legal matters, it was about control. It was about Musk's defiance and the system's attempt to bring him down. The prosecutor, a sharp-dressed man with a demeanor as cold as the judge's, stood up to present his opening statement. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about much more than the actions of one man. This is about the rule of law, about accountability, and about the importance of respect in our legal system. Mr. Musk has shown, time and time again, that he believes himself to be above the law. The prosecutor's words were cutting, but Musk barely reacted. He had heard it all before: accusations of arrogance, criticisms of his unconventional methods, claims that his actions were reckless. But Musk didn't care about the labels people slapped on him. He cared about one thing: achieving the impossible. And if that meant challenging authority along the way, so be it. Mr. Musk, the prosecutor continued, has publicly attacked the very institutions that allow society to function. He has mocked the courts, belittled our legal system, and shown utter disregard for the very people who have worked to create and uphold our laws. There it was, the accusation that had been floating in the air since Musk's arrival. His comments on social media, his public spats with government officials, and his disregard for authority had all been carefully documented and brought into the court as evidence of his contempt for the system. The prosecutor was setting the stage to make Musk's behavior seem not just erratic, but dangerous. Musk didn't flinch. He didn't need to. His lawyers were already prepared for this line of attack, and they weren't about to let the prosecution paint him as a lawless rebel without cause. His defense attorney, a calm, composed woman named Margaret Wells, stood up to speak in his defense. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you've just heard is an oversimplification of the truth," Wells began, her voice steady but full of conviction. "Yes, Mr. Musk is a disruptor. Yes, he challenges the status quo. But that does not make him above the law. It simply means that he is willing to question and challenge systems that, in his view, have become outdated or inefficient." She paused for a moment, letting her words sink in before continuing. "Mr. Musk has done more than any of us to push humanity forward. Through SpaceX, he's revolutionized space travel. Through Tesla, he's shown that electric vehicles can change the world. And through his other ventures, he's demonstrated that the future doesn't have to look the way the past does. He is not a man who mocks authority for the sake of it, he does it because he believes that the old ways of thinking are holding us back." The defense attorney's argument was strong, but there was something the jury could sense in the air, a shift. It wasn't just about Elon Musk's actions anymore. It was about the conflict between two worlds, the world of the established, the controlled, and the predictable, and the world of the disruptors, the visionaries, the ones who weren't content to sit idly by while the world stayed stuck in the past. The judge, still silent throughout the exchange, finally leaned forward. His voice, though controlled, was filled with tension. "Mr. Musk, I've warned you before about your behavior. This trial is not a platform for your personal vendettas or your belief in your own superiority. You will adhere to the decorum of this court, or I will hold you in contempt once again." Musk met the judge's gaze, his expression unwavering. "I'm not here to play by anyone's rules, Your Honor," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I'm here to show that the rules need to change." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, the entire courtroom was silent. Even the judge hesitated, his gavel hovering as if he weren't sure how to respond. But that was the thing about Elon Musk, he didn't just challenge ideas, he made people question their very assumptions. The prosecutor, sensing an opportunity to strike, quickly jumped in. "Your Honor, I move that we consider Mr. Musk's behavior both in and outside of the courtroom as part of the evidence in this trial. His disregard for authority, his refusal to follow protocol, these are not the actions of a man who respects the rule of law." The defense immediately objected, but the judge didn't waste time. "The court will take that under advisement," he said curtly, his gavel coming down with a decisive bang. "We'll proceed with the trial." As the trial continued, the conflict between Musk's defiant behavior and the legal system's demands escalated. Each time the judge tried to rein him in, Musk pushed back. He wasn't just fighting for his freedom or for his reputation, he was fighting for the very idea that innovation, progress, and the pursuit of bold dreams should never be held back by outdated structures. And as the tension in the room grew, it became clear that this battle was far from over. The stakes had only just begun to rise. The days in the courtroom dragged on, each one bringing new layers to the story. The prosecution's strategy had been to paint Musk as an arrogant billionaire who thought the law didn't apply to him. They tried to use his past as ammunition, his history of controversial tweets, his public clashes with government officials, and his ability to move through legal loopholes with ease. But every time they tried to trap Musk, he slipped through their fingers, his responses calculated and sharp, revealing just enough to get under their skin without giving away too much. The defense, on the other hand, was masterful. Margaret Wells, his attorney, was a seasoned strategist who knew how to turn the tables at a moment's notice. She wasn't just defending Musk's actions, she was defending his right to dream, to break boundaries, and to challenge the world as it was. She framed the courtroom as a microcosm of the larger fight Musk was waging outside of it, a fight against the status quo. Every argument she made, every point she hammered home, felt like a rallying cry for anyone who believed in the future Musk was creating. But despite all the legal maneuvering and the sharp exchanges between attorneys, there was an undeniable sense that something bigger was at stake. This wasn't just a battle between a man and the law. It was a battle between two philosophies, one that upheld the established order, and one that sought to tear it down in pursuit of something greater. As Musk sat in the courtroom on yet another tense afternoon, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing at a crossroads. The trial had become something far more than he had ever imagined. What started as a simple legal case had transformed into a fight for his very identity. But Musk wasn't the type of person to back down from a fight. He never had been. And so, as the judge called for a short recess, Musk stood up, his mind racing. He needed to do something. Something that would change the entire course of this trial. He glanced around the courtroom, his eyes falling on the row of reporters at the back. They were the ones who would tell the world the story. And right now, the world was watching him. Musk's attention shifted to his legal team, who had gathered around a table, speaking in hushed tones. His lawyer, Wells, caught his eye and raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure about this?" she whispered, her tone a mixture of concern and curiosity. Musk didn't answer right away. He knew that what he was about to do could escalate the situation even further. But that was the point, wasn't it? If they were going to make an example out of him, he would make sure the world would see it. He would make sure that this trial wasn't just another courtroom drama, it would be a statement. "I'm sure," Musk said, his voice calm but resolute. "Let's take this to the next level." With that, he turned on his heel and walked toward the doors leading to the courtroom's hallway. Wells hesitated for a moment, then followed him, her footsteps quickening. She didn't know what Musk was planning, but she could sense the shift in the air, the kind of energy that always preceded one of Musk's boldest moves. Outside the courtroom, Musk stood for a moment, his eyes scanning the space. There was something freeing about stepping away from the legal proceedings for a brief moment. The weight of the courtroom, the expectations, and the pressure from both sides seemed to lift for a second, as if he were reminded of the bigger picture. Then, he turned to Wells. "We need to address the world," he said. "Right now." Wells didn't need any further explanation. She knew exactly what he meant. The press, the social media, the reporters, they all needed to hear from Musk directly. He wasn't going to sit back and let others tell his story. He would take control, as he always did. Within minutes, Musk and his legal team were standing in front of the cameras outside the courthouse. The reporters, who had been waiting for the latest courtroom drama, turned their attention toward him. The cameras clicked, and microphones were thrust into his face. Musk smiled, his usual confidence radiating through him. "I know what everyone is thinking," he began, his voice cutting through the chaos. "You think I'm some billionaire who's above the law. That I'm some arrogant tech mogul who's out of touch with reality. Well, let me tell you something, I'm not here to play by your rules." He paused, letting his words sink in, before continuing. "I'm here because I believe in the future. I believe in changing the world. And if that means challenging a system that's broken, then so be it. This isn't about me. This isn't even about this trial. This is about every single person who has ever been told that their dreams were too big, too impossible. This is about pushing the boundaries of what's possible." The reporters were silent for a moment, unsure of how to respond. But Musk's words hung in the air, charged with something that went beyond the courtroom battle. It was the language of visionaries, the kind of bold, uncompromising rhetoric that changed the world. "We're at a crossroads, ladies and gentlemen," Musk continued. "The old way of thinking is dying. And in its place, we're going to create something new. Something better. This trial is just a small part of a much bigger picture. I'm not afraid of what's coming. In fact, I'm excited." With that, he turned and walked back into the courthouse, leaving the reporters in stunned silence. The world would hear him now. Back in the courtroom, the atmosphere had shifted. Musk's statement had sent shockwaves through the media and the public, and the ripple effect was already beginning to take shape. The judge, his gavel held tight in his hand, was visibly rattled. The courtroom had never experienced anything quite like this. But it wasn't just the judge who was rattled. The jury, too, was beginning to question their own assumptions. They had been hearing the legal arguments, but now they were hearing from the man himself. Musk's words were a declaration, not just of his innocence, but of his right to challenge the system itself. As the trial resumed, the air in the courtroom felt charged with anticipation. This wasn't just about a courtroom battle anymore. It was about something much bigger, a clash of ideologies, a fight for the future. And Musk was ready. Ready to take on whatever came next. The next few days in court felt like a blur. Musk's impromptu statement outside the courthouse had turned into a media frenzy. The press outlets were having a field day with his bold remarks, and the world was hanging on every word. Musk, as always, was the center of attention. Some saw him as a hero, a maverick pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Others saw him as a dangerous figure, a man whose influence had grown too large for comfort, someone who threatened the very foundation of the system. Inside the courtroom, however, things had become even more intense. The judge, visibly annoyed by Musk's defiance, had doubled down on his attempts to regain control. The prosecutor, sensing an opportunity, shifted tactics, bringing in new evidence, some of Musk's more controversial actions and statements from the past. They tried to frame Musk as a man who believed he was untouchable, and they argued that his arrogance in the courtroom was just another example of his refusal to accept responsibility. Musk sat silently as his past was dredged up in front of the jury. They played clips of his wild Twitter rants, of moments when his words had incited chaos in the stock market, of times when his public statements had seemed to disregard the truth in favor of sensationalism. Each piece of evidence painted a picture of a man whose impulsiveness had reached dangerous levels. But Musk didn't flinch. He remained calm and composed, sitting at the defense table, his eyes fixed on the prosecutor, not backing down for a second. He had made his point to the world, but now, it was time to face the consequences. As the prosecutor finished, there was a brief silence. The tension in the room was palpable, and for the first time, Musk could feel the weight of the situation. It was one thing to challenge the status quo, but it was another to be under a microscope, to have every part of your life scrutinized in front of a jury. This was a test of his resilience, his ability to rise above the noise, to withstand the pressure. Margaret Wells, his attorney, stood up to address the jury. Her voice was steady, but her eyes showed the strain of the long trial. She knew that this moment was crucial, that it was now or never to make the jury see the bigger picture. Members of the jury, she began, her tone measured but firm. What we've heard in this courtroom are the attacks on a man who has dared to think differently. We've heard about tweets, about moments of impulsiveness, and about choices that may have been controversial. But let me ask you this, how many of you have ever taken a risk? How many of you have ever had the courage to follow your dreams, despite what others said or how much the world tried to bring you down? She paused, letting her words settle. Elon Musk isn't a perfect man. But he is a visionary, and the reason we're here today, the reason he's on trial, is because he refuses to accept the world as it is. He doesn't believe in playing by the same tired rules. And yes, sometimes, that means he makes mistakes. But does that make him a criminal? Does that make him someone who should be silenced? The courtroom was still. Even the judge, who had remained stern and unyielding throughout the trial, looked momentarily shaken by Wells' words. For the first time, the jury seemed uncertain, their faces betraying the internal conflict they were experiencing. They had been presented with evidence, with facts, but now they were being asked to see beyond that, to understand the man behind the headlines. Musk's heart raced as he watched the jury. This was the moment when everything could change. Would they see him as just another arrogant billionaire? Or would they understand the bigger picture he had been fighting for all along? Wells continued, her voice softer now, more personal. When Elon Musk talks about changing the world, he's not talking about personal gain. He's talking about something far bigger than any of us, the future. The future of space travel, the future of electric cars, the future of technology and humanity. He's not playing a game here. He's trying to create a world that works for all of us. There was a pause in the courtroom, a heavy silence that seemed to stretch on for what felt like forever. Musk's mind raced, but his body remained still. He had made his case. Now, it was up to the jury. But then, something unexpected happened. The judge, who had been rigid in his control over the trial, leaned forward. "Mr. Musk," he said, his voice surprisingly calm, "I've heard a lot from both sides in this trial. I've seen the evidence. But I need to hear it from you. Not your lawyers, not the media, you." Musk blinked in surprise. This was unprecedented. He had been warned that his defiance could come with serious consequences. But here, in this moment, he was being given a chance to speak directly to the jury, to control the narrative for the first time in the trial. Slowly, Musk stood up. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. The media, the jury, the judge, they were all waiting. This was his moment to tell his side of the story, to explain who he was, what he was fighting for, and why he refused to back down. He cleared his throat, and the words came out, steady and sure. "I'm not here because I want to be a martyr," he began. "I'm here because I believe in the power of innovation. I believe in challenging the impossible. I believe that we, as a society, can do better. The world we live in is flawed, and I'm trying to change that. I don't expect everyone to agree with me, but I do expect the right to challenge the world as it is. No one should be punished for dreaming bigger." The room was still, but Musk could see it in their eyes, he had connected with them. For the first time, he wasn't just the eccentric billionaire. He was the man behind the ideas, the dreams, the ambitions that had defined his entire life. The judge looked at Musk, his expression unreadable. "I think we've heard enough for today," he said, his voice grave. "We will reconvene tomorrow to hear closing arguments. Members of the jury, remember to consider all that you've heard." As the courtroom emptied, Musk walked out, his heart pounding. He didn't know what the verdict would be, but he felt a shift, a sense of hope that hadn't been there before. He had put everything on the line, and now, there was no turning back. The courtroom was tense as the final day of the trial arrived. Musk's legal team sat at their table, their faces a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. The media was packed in the back of the room, their cameras poised to capture every moment. Musk himself sat quietly, his gaze steady but focused inward, as if preparing for something far beyond the immediate moment. The fate of his reputation, his future, and the legacy he had spent years building were now in the hands of 12 strangers. The judge entered, his robe sweeping behind him as the room fell silent. "Members of the jury," he began, his voice measured, "you have heard the arguments from both sides, and now it is your responsibility to decide whether or not the defendant, Elon Musk, has acted in a way that warrants legal punishment. As a reminder, the charges against Mr. Musk involve actions that, according to the prosecution, demonstrate a disregard for the law, for order, and for accountability." There was a pause as the judge looked around the room, his eyes meeting those of the jurors. "It is now your duty to deliberate. You may now retire to the jury room." As the jury filed out, a heavy silence settled over the courtroom. Musk could feel it, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He wasn't just waiting for a verdict. He was waiting for the world to decide who he was, what he stood for, and whether his refusal to be silenced had been justified. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the shuffling of papers and the quiet murmurs of Musk's legal team. They were all looking at him now, and he could tell that they, too, were waiting. It wasn't just about winning or losing. It was about something deeper, a question of whether the vision Musk had been pushing for, a vision that threatened to reshape the world, could survive the scrutiny of a system built on tradition and restraint. Musk leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes for just a moment. His mind drifted back to the journey that had led him here. To the moments of doubt, the setbacks, the risks that had nearly cost him everything. He thought about SpaceX's early days, the countless failures before the first successful launch, and how each of those moments had shaped his resolve. He thought about Tesla, about how the world had mocked him when he first proposed the idea of an electric car that could rival gasoline-powered vehicles. Now, Tesla was one of the most valuable companies in the world. Musk had faced criticism, ridicule, and even sabotage, but he had always come out stronger, more determined. But this was different. This wasn't just about a company or a product. This was about who he was as a person. It was about the world telling him that his way of thinking was dangerous, that his refusal to conform was a threat. It was about the establishment pushing back against him, trying to shut him down because he dared to challenge the rules. As the minutes stretched into hours, Musk couldn't help but wonder how the world would react to the outcome of the trial. If the jury acquitted him, it would be a victory, but it would also be a symbol that the world was beginning to understand the value of bold ideas, of thinking differently. On the other hand, if he was found guilty, it could be a devastating blow. It would show that the system could, indeed, silence those who dared to dream too big. But Musk wasn't afraid of the consequences. In a way, he had already won. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the jury returned. The room seemed to shrink as they took their seats. The foreman stood and turned to the judge, his face unreadable. "Your Honor," he said, his voice echoing in the silence, "we, the jury, have reached a verdict." The judge nodded. "Please, read the verdict." The foreman cleared his throat and glanced at Musk, who held his breath, his heart pounding in his chest. "We find the defendant, Elon Musk, not guilty on all charges." The room exploded into chaos. Musk's legal team stood up, their faces breaking into smiles of relief. Some of the reporters at the back of the room gasped, others quickly scribbled notes, their pens flying across the pages. Musk remained seated for a moment, taking in the words. "Not guilty." The words seemed to hang in the air, surreal. A smile tugged at the corners of his lips, but he didn't jump up or celebrate. Instead, he stood slowly, his gaze shifting to the jury, who were watching him intently. There was a quiet respect in their eyes. Musk had won, not because of the legal technicalities, but because he had made them see something beyond the surface. He had made them understand that his actions, while unconventional, were driven by something far bigger than himself. They had seen the man behind the headlines, and they had understood. The judge banged his gavel, bringing the room back to order. "This trial is concluded," he said, his voice firm. "Mr. Musk, you are free to go." Musk nodded, turning to his legal team, who were already congratulating him. But even as they celebrated, Musk couldn't help but feel a sense of quiet reflection. This wasn't just a win for him. It was a win for anyone who had ever been told that their ideas were too far-fetched, too ambitious. It was a win for all the dreamers, the innovators, the rebels who dared to question the way things had always been. As he walked out of the courtroom, the press rushed to surround him. The flashes from cameras were blinding, the questions coming at him fast and furious. But Musk didn't answer them. Instead, he walked past the reporters, his mind already racing toward the future. There were more battles to fight, more dreams to chase, and more roads to build. The verdict had been reached, but the journey was far from over. The days following the trial felt almost surreal. Elon Musk had won, no, he had prevailed. He had faced down a courtroom full of people who wanted to silence him, who wanted to make an example of him. And he had come out unscathed, his record intact. The verdict was in his favor, and yet, for Musk, it felt like only the beginning. After the trial, the media frenzy that followed was relentless. Headlines screamed about the courtroom drama, the unpredictable nature of the trial, and how Musk had turned it all into a spectacle. On one side, people were calling him a hero, a modern-day champion of free speech and innovation. On the other, the critics were louder than ever, condemning his behavior, his arrogance, and his refusal to conform to the rules. Musk didn't care about the noise. As always, he had his eyes on the horizon, focused on what was next. There were new projects to push forward, new frontiers to break into. The world had tried to box him in, to label him, but Musk had spent his entire life defying labels. He was sitting at his desk late one night, scrolling through emails, when a message popped up that caught his attention. It was from SpaceX. There had been a breakthrough. One of their rockets had successfully completed an orbit with a new fuel system that could revolutionize space travel. Musk leaned forward, his mind racing. This was what mattered. This was the future. But even as he celebrated the success of his company, something nagged at the back of his mind. The trial may have been over, but the war was far from won. The same forces that had tried to tear him down would continue to push back. They were already looking for new ways to bring him to heel, to force him to bow to their standards of decency, to fit into their neatly packaged narrative. He knew it was coming. The next attack. The next trial, whether it would be in the court of public opinion or a literal courtroom, was inevitable. Musk had become a lightning rod for controversy, but he wasn't about to back down. If anything, the victory in court had only fueled his resolve. He was done with playing nice. If they wanted a fight, he would give them one. If the world didn't understand him, he would make them understand. His mission, his vision, would never change. He had seen the impact he could make. He had seen Tesla's electric cars change the automotive industry, SpaceX push the boundaries of space exploration, and Neuralink begin to rewire the future of human consciousness. Musk was playing the long game, and he would not let anything stop him. But even as he prepared for what was coming next, there was one thing Musk couldn't ignore. He couldn't forget the faces of the jurors, their faces as they had listened to him speak in court. It wasn't just about winning the case, it was about showing them who he was, what he stood for. There was a moment in that courtroom, that brief but powerful exchange when he had spoken directly to them, that had shifted something in him. It wasn't just about the verdict anymore, it was about the influence he could have, the power to shape the narrative. Musk had always been a man of action, but now, he knew that sometimes, it was just as important to speak up. To challenge the narrative. To make people see beyond their preconceived notions. As he stood up and walked toward the window of his office, looking out over the sprawling landscape below, he thought about how far he had come. It felt like a lifetime ago that he had been that young entrepreneur with a wild idea about electric cars. Now, Tesla was worth more than the largest automakers in the world, and SpaceX was on the verge of a new era in space exploration. But there was still so much to do. Still so many people to convince. Still so much to change. Musk smiled to himself, a quiet confidence returning. The system may have tried to shut him down, but he wasn't going anywhere. He had learned something important in that courtroom, that the fight was never over. That every victory, no matter how big, was only a stepping stone to the next challenge. And there would always be another challenge. His phone buzzed on the desk beside him, breaking his train of thought. It was a message from his assistant. The board of directors wants to meet with you tomorrow. They're pushing for a faster rollout of the Mars mission timeline. Musk chuckled. Of course they were. The plan to send humans to Mars had always been a dream of his, one that seemed almost impossible just a few years ago. Now, it was within reach. But he knew that every step forward would bring new questions, new hurdles, and new people who didn't believe it could happen. He picked up the phone, dialing his assistant. Tell them I'll be there, he said, his voice steady, purposeful. And let's make sure they know we're not slowing down. Musk put the phone down and turned back to the window. The night sky above was clear, the stars twinkling with an infinite number of possibilities. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to relax. This was his world now. He had fought for it, and he had earned it. Tomorrow, he would keep pushing forward. The next battle awaited. But for tonight, he could just breathe. For tonight, the future was still his to shape. The days following the trial felt like a whirlwind. Elon Musk was used to the chaos, but there was something different this time. The victory had brought him into the spotlight in a way that he hadn't anticipated. Yes, he had always been a headline maker, but now it seemed like every move he made was scrutinized. It was like the world was watching him, waiting for him to slip up. And he knew it. Musk spent most of his days in meetings, working tirelessly on multiple fronts. Tesla, SpaceX, and Neuralink all had their own set of challenges that were becoming more complicated with every passing day. The public had barely caught their breath from the trial, and now, the media was focusing on the next big thing he was doing. What was Musk planning next? What kind of innovative breakthrough would he unveil to the world? The pressure was building. He sat in the sleek, glass-walled conference room of Tesla's headquarters in Palo Alto, a massive project map spread out on the table before him. Engineers and executives shuffled papers, glancing nervously at Musk, who was leaning back in his chair, hands steepled together, deep in thought. The room was filled with an electric tension, everyone was aware of what was at stake. This wasn't just about new technology, this was about redefining the future. Musk was pushing his companies into uncharted territory, and not everyone was convinced they were ready. "We're hitting some roadblocks on the battery technology," Elon, one of the engineers said hesitantly. "The new generation we're working on isn't performing as expected." Musk's eyes flickered up. "How bad is it?" "It's a slight issue with the charging cycle," the engineer continued, "it's not quite as efficient as we thought it would be. If we don't fix this, the next-gen cars won't be able to last as long as we promised." Musk considered this. He had heard similar concerns many times before, but each time they had been overcome. Innovation was never easy. But every failure, every roadblock, only pushed him to go further, faster. He wouldn't stop now, not when they were so close. "Let's not waste time on what we can't control. What's the solution?" Musk's tone was firm, but with a hint of impatience. He was always pushing his team, always demanding more, because he knew that was the only way to make history. The team scrambled, talking amongst themselves, but Musk's mind was already racing ahead. They were on the brink of something groundbreaking. His dream wasn't just to make electric cars mainstream, it was to disrupt the entire automotive industry and beyond. He wanted to prove that it was possible to do what no one thought could be done, completely change the way the world used energy. But the pressure of his success was catching up to him. Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, every project he touched seemed to have a string of complications. SpaceX had just suffered a minor setback on its Starship project, a delay in the launch timeline due to new safety protocols. Neuralink, though progressing rapidly in its testing phase, had been met with ethical criticisms that threatened to halt the progress Musk had made in the neurotechnology field. Each day seemed to bring new obstacles, and though Musk had become adept at navigating through them, it was becoming clearer that the bigger his vision grew, the higher the stakes. It wasn't just about the technology anymore. It was about the world around him, society, regulators, critics, and even allies. There were powerful forces at play, ones that had nothing to do with rocket launches or self-driving cars but everything to do with whether Musk's ideas would be allowed to thrive. The recent trial had only intensified the scrutiny, and now, his every move was being watched more closely than ever. He stood up abruptly, pacing the length of the room. His mind wasn't on the immediate problems in front of him, though. His thoughts were elsewhere. They were on Mars. They were on the future he had always dreamed of, a future where humanity was no longer confined to Earth, where people could live and work on other planets, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. But there were those who didn't share his vision, people who thought his dreams were reckless, who wanted to hold him back. And Musk had learned that even the best ideas could be stifled if the right people decided to pull the strings. He glanced back at his team. "We'll fix the battery issue. If we have to go back to the drawing board, we'll do it. We can't afford to slow down now. But I need all of you focused. If we let these obstacles beat us, we won't just lose time, we'll lose the future." The engineers nodded, their faces a mixture of resolve and exhaustion. Musk could see it in their eyes, he had pushed them, yes, but he had also inspired them. They knew that working for him meant taking risks, that success was never guaranteed, but the potential to change the world was enough to keep them going. As Musk left the meeting room, his mind was still racing. He couldn't afford to slow down. There were too many people counting on him. Too many lives, too many industries, too many people on the edge of something big. If he stopped now, even for a moment, everything could unravel. Outside the building, the Silicon Valley sun was starting to set, casting long shadows over the landscape. Musk stared out at the horizon, lost in thought. The road ahead would be difficult. He knew that. But he also knew that he was exactly where he needed to be. He wasn't about to let anyone tell him what was possible. Elon Musk had always been able to handle pressure. It was a constant companion throughout his career. But now, as his companies continued to break barriers and reach unprecedented heights, the pressure was becoming something else entirely, a force that seemed to push from all sides, a mounting weight that threatened to crack everything he had worked so hard to build. It wasn't just the internal challenges within Tesla, SpaceX, or Neuralink. It was the external forces, the critics, the regulators, the investors, those who were now paying much closer attention to Musk's every move. And for every new innovation he introduced, it seemed like there was someone, somewhere, ready to tear it down. Musk stood at the podium at a Tesla press conference, answering questions from reporters. The room was packed with journalists, photographers, and tech bloggers, each eager to get a scoop, a glimpse into the man who was reshaping the world. But behind the flashing cameras and the flashing lights, Musk could feel the weight of the moment. He had been here so many times before, but this felt different. This time, the stakes felt higher. You've pushed the boundaries with your electric vehicles, Elon. But with Tesla's expansion into the global market, some analysts are saying that you're overextending yourself. Are you worried that Tesla's growth may become unsustainable? A reporter asked, his tone sharp, as if daring Musk to back down. Musk's face didn't show any sign of the tension he felt, but inside, his mind raced. He had heard this criticism for years: Tesla was too ambitious, too risky. But the company had survived, thrived even, in the face of it. Yet, the pressure was different now. Tesla wasn't just a startup anymore, it was a publicly traded company with thousands of employees and millions of shareholders who were all watching, waiting for a misstep. The growth of Tesla isn't just about increasing profits, Musk replied, his voice steady, calm. It's about accelerating the world's transition to sustainable energy. If that means taking risks and pushing beyond conventional limits, then I'm willing to do it. The future of humanity depends on it. The room fell silent for a moment as the reporters scribbled down notes. Musk wasn't just talking about electric cars anymore. He was talking about the entire future of energy, of civilization. His words carried weight, and he knew it. But he also knew that this speech wouldn't be enough to silence his critics. As he wrapped up the conference, Musk felt the familiar buzz of his phone vibrating in his pocket. It was his assistant. "You've got a meeting in 20 minutes with the board. They're not happy with the progress of the Mars mission," the assistant's voice crackled through the speaker. Musk's heart sank. He had known this was coming. The pressure to succeed in the Mars mission was enormous, and he couldn't afford to let it falter. The clock was ticking. Every delay in the timeline was a setback, a sign that the dream was slipping further away. And for the board of directors, it wasn't just a matter of vision, it was a matter of the company's bottom line. He arrived at the meeting room, his mind racing. The board members were already seated, their faces a mixture of concern and frustration. The CEO of Tesla, a woman named Karen Pierce, was the first to speak. "Elon, we're all aware of the stakes with the Mars mission. But right now, we have serious concerns about your ability to balance it with Tesla's growth. We need you to be more focused on the company's immediate needs. These delays with SpaceX's Starship are getting out of hand. Investors are starting to ask questions." Musk sat down at the head of the table, folding his hands in front of him. He had expected this. The pressure to focus on profitability, to meet the short-term goals, was always there. But he wasn't in this to just make money. He was in this to change the world, to make a mark on history. Mars wasn't a side project. It was the future of humanity. "I understand the concerns," Musk said, his voice measured but firm. "But the Mars mission is not a luxury project. It's essential for the survival of humanity. If we put it on the back burner, we're not just delaying progress, we're potentially compromising the future. Pierce exchanged glances with the other board members, her expression unreadable. We're not saying we abandon the Mars mission, Elon. But you need to understand that Tesla's growth and the success of our current projects must remain the priority. We cannot afford to neglect the business side of things. Musk leaned forward slightly. I'm not neglecting the business side. I'm building the future. If we succeed with Tesla's mission, then we'll have the resources to fund everything else, including SpaceX. But if we take our foot off the gas now, if we let these small setbacks derail us, we'll never get anywhere. The conversation continued, but Musk felt the familiar heat rising in his chest. He had been through so many meetings like this, so many boardroom confrontations where the short-term goals clashed with his long-term vision. The problem was, people like Karen Pierce didn't see the world the way Musk did. They didn't see the potential in the long shots, in the bets on things that were still years away. They wanted immediate results, tangible returns, and they weren't willing to wait for the future to catch up. As the meeting wrapped up, Musk stood and excused himself, his mind already calculating his next move. The pressure wasn't just from the board, it was from everywhere. The regulators were breathing down his neck, Tesla's competitors were closing in, and the public was fickle, demanding results faster than ever. But Musk had always thrived under pressure. It was his fuel, his driving force. And though the weight was heavy, he knew that it was in these moments when everything seemed to be falling apart, that he had the opportunity to push even harder. He wasn't about to let the world's doubts derail him. The future was still his to shape. All he had to do was keep going. The morning after the board meeting, Musk found himself standing in his office overlooking the sprawling Tesla campus. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting long shadows across the facility. The machines were humming, the assembly lines moving, but inside, the feeling of unease was thick. The board's concerns lingered in his mind, but so did his own thoughts about the future, his future. Musk knew the stakes were higher than ever. SpaceX was on the cusp of reaching Mars, Tesla had a global empire to maintain, and Neuralink was still navigating the ethical minefield of neurotechnology. But beyond all of that, there was the matter of his image, his reputation, and the growing army of critics who were circling in anticipation of his next mistake. He couldn't help but feel that the web around him was tightening. His every move was being analyzed by the media, investors, and, most importantly, his competitors. Musk had always been a risk-taker, but now, the risks felt more dangerous, more consequential. Every innovation had its consequences, every victory came at a price, and now it felt like the whole world was waiting for him to fall. The phone buzzed on his desk, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was a message from his assistant. "Elon, we've just received an urgent call from the Department of Transportation. They're looking to discuss the regulatory concerns regarding Tesla's autopilot systems. They want to meet later today." Musk gritted his teeth. The Department of Transportation. Another government body seeking to slow down progress. Autopilot was one of Tesla's most innovative features, but it had been embroiled in controversy since its inception. Accidents, miscommunications, and public fear had all conspired to paint autopilot as dangerous in the eyes of the public. And now, the government was ready to step in with its heavy hand. This was becoming a pattern. Whenever Musk's companies made headway, the forces of tradition, bureaucracy, and regulation seemed to emerge to block him. Whether it was the auto industry, the space industry, or the tech industry, it always felt like he was battling against an old guard that refused to adapt. He thought about the pressure. The board wanted short-term results. The government wanted regulations. The public wanted perfection. And in the middle of all this, Musk was expected to keep pushing forward, to continue making breakthroughs, to continue dreaming bigger than anyone else dared to. He stood up and walked to the window. The sprawling campus of Tesla, the rocket launches in Florida, the futuristic technology being developed at Neuralink, it was all part of the larger vision. But there was a constant tug of war. He had to navigate between progress and the constraints imposed by others. And that tension was getting worse. The more he pushed, the more resistance he faced. He sat back down at his desk and immediately began reading through the latest report on Tesla's autopilot system. The technology was ahead of its time. It worked, but the accidents, the glitches, the media frenzy around it, had taken their toll on public perception. The fact that the system had saved countless lives, as well as the fact that it was the backbone of Tesla's push to create fully autonomous vehicles, seemed to be ignored by the critics. But Musk had long known that change was never easy. When you were ahead of your time, people didn't always understand what you were trying to do. They feared the unknown. And he had always been willing to take on that fear, to push people to see what was possible, even when they didn't want to. The phone buzzed again. This time, it was from the media team. "Elon, we have a situation," the voice on the other end said. "The press is picking up on the rumors about your personal life. There's speculation about your relationships and your behavior that's starting to take off in the tabloids. We need to get ahead of this before it spirals out of control." Musk sighed. It was the same cycle again. His personal life had always been a target for the media, a way for critics to undermine his credibility and distract from the real issues. They couldn't touch his companies, so they attacked his personal character instead. He had known this would happen. Whenever Musk reached new heights, the vultures would start circling, looking for any weakness they could exploit. They'd twist his words, exaggerate his mistakes, and turn his actions into something sinister. They'd make it about him, not about the world-changing innovations he was trying to build. It didn't matter how much success he achieved. It didn't matter how many billions he made or how many records SpaceX broke. They'd always try to pull him back down. He took a deep breath and composed himself. No matter how many times this happened, he couldn't let it throw him off course. The media storm was a temporary distraction, but the real battle was ahead of him. The Mars mission. The future of sustainable energy. The neural interface that would change how humans interact with machines. Musk stood up again, more resolute than before. He walked over to the window once more, staring out at the horizon. The world would always try to hold him back. But it didn't matter. He wasn't here for fame or approval. He was here to change the course of history, to do what others thought was impossible. The pressure was suffocating, but it had always been this way. He had faced this before, every challenge, every obstacle, and yet he had always come out the other side stronger, more determined. This time would be no different. As he walked out of his office and into the elevator, his mind was already calculating his next move. The meeting with the Department of Transportation. The media storm. The next trial, whether literal or figurative. Whatever was coming next, he would face it head-on. The future had never been more uncertain, but it had also never been more exciting. And Musk wouldn't let anything stop him. How do you think Musk will handle the growing pressure from both external forces and the media? Will he be able to overcome these challenges, or will they derail his progress? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. The stakes just keep getting higher. Elon Musk walked into the conference room, the cool, sterile air of the government building brushing against his face as he made his way to the long table. The Department of Transportation representatives were already seated, their suits pressed neatly, faces unreadable. This was the moment where the rubber would meet the road, the showdown with the regulators, the very people who could stifle Tesla's progress, slow down SpaceX's ambitions, and jeopardize Neuralink's future. Musk had faced opposition before. Investors who doubted him. Journalists who mocked him. Even his own employees, at times, questioning his vision. But this was different. The government had the power to halt progress, to impose restrictions, to delay everything Musk had been working towards. He took a deep breath and sat at the head of the table, his back straight, eyes sharp. Across from him was the head of the DOT's regulatory division, a woman named Claire Simmons. She was an imposing figure in the world of transportation policy, known for her no-nonsense attitude and her unwavering stance on safety. "Mr. Musk," Simmons began, her voice cool and direct, "we're here today to discuss the recent concerns raised by Tesla's autopilot systems and the increased number of accidents involving the technology. As you know, public safety is our #1 priority. We've seen a growing number of incidents that suggest the autopilot system is not operating as intended." Musk leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. He had been preparing for this moment for weeks. He knew the data, the statistics, the success stories, he knew it all. But he also knew that this meeting wasn't just about facts. It was about politics, perception, and power. "Claire," Musk said, his tone calm but firm, "I understand the concerns. But the reality is that Tesla's autopilot has saved more lives than it has harmed. The technology is still in development, and yes, there are bugs to work out. But it's 1,000 times safer than the average human driver. It's a step towards a future where accidents are drastically reduced, where lives are saved." Simmons didn't flinch. "Mr. Musk, saving lives is the goal. But we cannot ignore the public outcry and the growing number of investigations into the system. There are questions about whether Tesla is rushing this technology into the market without enough oversight. We cannot allow companies to prioritize innovation over safety." Musk felt the familiar spark of frustration rise within him. This wasn't just about safety, it was about control. About regulation in a system that didn't understand the pace of innovation. His mind flashed back to when he had first started with Tesla, when the skeptics said electric cars were impossible, impractical, too expensive to ever replace traditional vehicles. He had proved them wrong, one electric car at a time. Now, the same forces were trying to slow him down. "I'm not here to argue with you, Claire," Musk said, his voice low and controlled. "I'm here to work with you. Tesla has always been committed to safety. But the truth is, the more we innovate, the more the establishment resists. Look at the automotive industry as a whole, it's been built on outdated systems, resistant to change. And now, we're seeing the same resistance from the regulators. The world is changing. We can't let it fall behind because of fear." Simmons raised an eyebrow, clearly unfazed by Musk's passionate plea. "I don't need a lecture on innovation, Mr. Musk. What I need is a concrete plan that shows how Tesla will improve its autopilot system. If the technology can't meet our standards, we'll have no choice but to impose stricter regulations or pull it from the market entirely." The room was silent for a moment. Musk could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This was the kind of meeting that could make or break everything. If the regulators decided to act, it could set back Tesla for years, maybe even derail the entire vision he had for the future of autonomous vehicles. But Musk wasn't a man who would back down. He had seen far worse odds and overcome them. And he had one thing the regulators didn't, a vision that extended beyond the limits of the present, a future they couldn't yet see. He sat back in his chair, his mind racing as he thought about his next move. He had to win this battle, not just for Tesla, but for the entire industry. The world couldn't afford to slow down now. Humanity needed to advance, needed to embrace the future of transportation. "I'll tell you what we're doing," Musk said, his voice steady. "We're working with the best minds in AI and machine learning to improve the autopilot system. We're going to make it safer, smarter, and more reliable. But we're not going to wait for perfection before moving forward. If we wait for that, we'll never move anywhere." Simmons narrowed her eyes, clearly weighing his words. "And what about the accidents? What about the lives that have been lost?" Musk's expression hardened, but there was a glimmer of something deeper in his eyes, determination. "I'm not saying we ignore the accidents. Every life lost is a tragedy. But the data is clear. Tesla's autopilot is safer than human drivers. If we stop now, we'll be condemning millions of people to more accidents, more deaths, all because we didn't want to take the next step. We have a responsibility to push forward, to innovate for the future, even when it's uncomfortable." Simmons was quiet for a long moment. Then, she looked at the other members of the regulatory team, exchanging glances. Musk could sense the tension in the room. He had made his case. Now, all he could do was wait. Finally, Simmons spoke again. "We'll be reviewing your proposal, Mr. Musk. We'll be in touch soon with our decision. But let me be clear, if Tesla cannot meet our safety standards, we will act. We have a duty to the public, and we won't let the rush for innovation come at their expense." Musk nodded, his jaw tight. He had done everything he could. The rest was out of his hands. As he left the room, a thought kept circling in his mind: the regulators had no idea what was coming. They didn't see the bigger picture. They couldn't see the future he was trying to create. But he would keep pushing. Because the future wasn't going to wait. The buzz around Elon Musk's courtroom battle with the regulators was already making headlines before the trial even began. News outlets, tech blogs, and financial analysts were all speculating about what would come next. But for Musk, it wasn't about the headlines. It never had been. This was a battle for the future. A battle to prove that progress could not be stifled by bureaucracy or fear. Musk had been through plenty of legal skirmishes in the past. Tesla had faced lawsuits, fines, and regulatory battles since its inception. But this was different. This wasn't just about Tesla's autopilot or even about the safety of autonomous vehicles. This was about a fundamental question: could technology, innovation, and the future of humanity be shackled by the slow-moving gears of the legal and political system? The trial began with an almost theatrical flair. Musk, ever the showman, had walked into the courtroom flanked by his top legal team. The media was in full force, capturing every moment, every gesture, and every word. Musk, wearing a simple black suit and tie, looked calm and collected, but anyone who knew him could sense the storm brewing beneath the surface. The courtroom was packed, not just with journalists, but with Tesla fans, critics, and tech enthusiasts. Everyone was watching. The judge, a seasoned legal veteran by the name of Judge Samantha Hayes, took her seat at the bench. She had a reputation for being tough, fair, and unyielding, which made her both a formidable adversary and, in Musk's eyes, a critical ally to win over. "Mr. Musk," she began, her voice steady and authoritative, "we are here today to address the concerns raised by the Department of Transportation regarding Tesla's autopilot system. You have heard the accusations and the concerns, and now it is time for you to present your case." Musk stood up, his posture erect, his voice calm but with an undeniable intensity. "Your Honor, we are here today because innovation is being held hostage. We are on the cusp of a breakthrough that could change the world. Tesla's autopilot is already safer than human drivers, and every day we improve it. But we cannot do that if we are constantly being weighed down by regulations that don't understand the pace of technological progress." The room fell silent as Musk spoke, and for a moment, he felt a rush of confidence. This was his arena. This was the place where he could make his case, where the truth could be heard. But as he spoke, he couldn't ignore the glares coming from the DOT representatives seated across the room. They were determined to prove their point that safety came first, and that Musk's desire to push forward was reckless, even dangerous. Judge Hayes, ever the pragmatist, raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Musk, I understand your position, but the law must protect the public. We cannot allow a few accidents to be brushed aside, no matter how much potential your technology has. If Tesla cannot guarantee the safety of its system, then it must be regulated." Musk's mind raced as he processed her words. He had anticipated this response, but it still stung. The battle he had fought for years to make electric cars mainstream, the battles to innovate in space, in transportation, and in human-computer interaction, he had faced opposition before, but this was different. It wasn't just about what was possible, it was about what was being allowed. He knew that if he lost this fight, Tesla could be forced into regulatory purgatory, a place where progress slowed to a crawl. The world couldn't afford that. "Your Honor," Musk said, his voice now sharp, "safety is not something we take lightly. Every day, Tesla is collecting data to improve the system. We work with the best minds in AI to ensure that our autopilot system is smarter and safer than anything currently on the road. And I would argue that our technology is more advanced than any other vehicle system available today. The DOT representative, a man named Richard Callaway, stood up, interrupting him with an air of superiority. Mr. Musk, it's not enough to say that your system is safer, we need concrete proof. We need guarantees that people will not die in accidents because of your so-called innovation. The courtroom erupted in murmurs, and Musk could feel the pressure mounting. It wasn't just about the data anymore, it was about perception. The public was already on edge, fearful of autonomous technology. If Tesla didn't win this case, the negative backlash could push back progress in ways he couldn't even predict. Musk's eyes narrowed, his jaw clenched. I'm not here to make promises. I'm here to make a difference. And while the regulators demand perfection, I'm offering you something better, a future where human error doesn't cost lives. A future where people can drive, and eventually live, without the constant fear of death by human mistake. You can't regulate the future to death. Innovation doesn't wait for the perfect answer, it evolves. Judge Hayes leaned forward, steepling her fingers. I see your passion, Mr. Musk. But passion alone won't solve the problem. The question is, can you convince us that Tesla can live up to the promise it makes to its customers, and to the general public? Musk hesitated for just a moment. He wasn't just fighting for Tesla anymore, he was fighting for an entire industry, for a future that could change the way humanity interacted with technology. His words could make or break everything. The truth is, Musk said slowly, the world will always resist change. But that doesn't mean we stop. Tesla isn't just a company. We're a movement. And as long as I'm breathing, I'll keep pushing for that future. The courtroom was silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Judge Hayes nodded, signaling for the next phase of the trial to begin. As Musk sat back down, his mind continued to churn. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, he felt the faintest flicker of hope. He had made his case. The rest was out of his hands. But he knew one thing for sure, no matter the outcome, he would never stop fighting. He couldn't. Not when the future was on the line. The media frenzy around the trial had reached its peak. Every network, from major news outlets to niche tech blogs, was covering the latest twists and turns. But despite the spotlight, Elon Musk had remained unshaken. The courtroom battle had been intense, with emotions running high, but there was a glimmer of hope. Musk had won the first round, securing a ruling that allowed Tesla to continue developing its autopilot technology without immediate restrictions. However, as the gavel had come down, he knew the fight was far from over. In many ways, this legal victory had been a double-edged sword. Yes, Musk had avoided an immediate regulatory shutdown, but the ruling had come with a string of conditions. Tesla would be required to implement a new series of safety measures, conduct additional tests, and submit detailed progress reports to the Department of Transportation. These steps were a victory in some ways but also a clear signal that Tesla's freewheeling pace of innovation would now be watched more closely than ever before. As the news spread across the globe, Musk found himself back in the center of attention, again. The reaction was mixed. Some praised his victory as a triumph of innovation over bureaucracy, while others criticized him for not being able to fully shake off the regulators' grip. Musk was aware of the optics. Winning was important, but at what cost? The industry was now watching Tesla's every move. If he failed to meet the new standards, the backlash could be disastrous, and the pressure was mounting. Later that evening, Musk sat in his office, staring at the screen of his computer. His emails flooded in, filled with congratulatory notes from friends and investors. But it wasn't the praise he sought, it was the next challenge. The path ahead had just gotten narrower. He felt his phone buzz on the desk, interrupting his thoughts. It was a message from Gwynne Shotwell, SpaceX's president, and a trusted ally. She'd been with him from the beginning, and her advice had often been the compass that guided him through the chaos. "Hey Elon, just heard the news. Great win. But I've got some concerns. The fallout from this trial could affect us too. Have you thought about how the public perception of Tesla could impact SpaceX's future projects?" Musk paused for a moment. Of course, he had considered the bigger picture. He couldn't afford to let this trial tarnish the image of SpaceX, not when they were on the verge of launching the Starship for Mars. Public perception of Tesla was now a wild card, and if it went south, it could damage everything he was trying to achieve across his ventures. "I'll figure it out," Musk texted back quickly. "We can't let this slow us down. The future is too important. But let's meet tomorrow morning. We need to start preparing for any potential fallout." As Musk clicked the send button, he felt a surge of determination. This was the price of progress. He had known it from the beginning. Every step forward came with consequences, but those consequences were nothing compared to the reward waiting at the finish line. He wasn't in this to play it safe. He was in this to change the world. The following morning, Musk met with Gwynne Shotwell and a few key members of the SpaceX leadership team. They gathered in a conference room, its walls adorned with images of rockets soaring into space. The room, filled with the sharp smell of coffee and the hum of quiet conversation, felt familiar, almost comforting. But the conversation that was about to unfold was far from ordinary. Gwynne wasted no time. "Elon, we need to talk about how this Tesla trial could impact SpaceX. The media is already connecting the two companies, and it's not looking great. There's a lot of public scrutiny around the idea of Musk's empire, and if Tesla falters, it could drag down SpaceX by association." Musk listened carefully, his brow furrowed. He'd always operated under the belief that SpaceX and Tesla, while both led by him, were fundamentally different companies with separate missions. But Gwynne had a point. If the public's faith in Tesla wavered, it could affect the trust they placed in his other ventures. "So, what's your recommendation?" Musk asked. "We need a two-pronged strategy. First, you've got to continue being transparent with Tesla's progress. Keep the public informed about the improvements being made to the autopilot system. Maybe even launch a PR campaign showing how Tesla is leading the way in safety and innovation." Musk nodded. "What's the second part?" "Second, we need to make a clear distinction between Tesla and SpaceX. While both companies are at the cutting edge of technology, SpaceX has always been about exploration, about pushing humanity to the stars. The public needs to understand that Tesla is a car company with its own set of challenges, but SpaceX has a singular mission to make life multiplanetary. If we let them blur the lines, we risk losing the narrative." Musk sat back in his chair, taking it all in. The stakes were higher than ever. If SpaceX's public image could be tied to Tesla's troubles, the future of interplanetary travel, his grand vision, could be at risk. "We'll have to move fast. The regulators are watching us, but so is everyone else. We can't afford to slip up." Musk's voice had a note of steel to it. "Prepare the teams. We need to address the media, get ahead of this before the narrative gets out of hand." Later that day, Musk appeared in a live interview on a popular tech channel. It was an opportunity to control the narrative, to directly address the concerns of both the public and investors. He knew the stakes. As the camera lights flickered on, Musk greeted the host, and the interview began. "Elon, congratulations on your victory in court. What comes next for Tesla?" Musk's response was deliberate. "Tesla will continue to push forward with our vision of a sustainable future. We've learned a lot from this trial. We're committed to making sure our technology is as safe as possible, and will be transparent with the public every step of the way. But let's be clear, we won't stop innovating. We can't afford to. Some have criticized you for being too aggressive with Tesla's autopilot," the host pressed. "Do you think your approach is too fast, too reckless?" Musk smiled, though it was more of a tight grin. "When you're creating the future, you don't have the luxury of moving at a slow pace. The world has been stuck in a loop for too long, using outdated technologies that harm our planet. It's time to change that. But change doesn't happen without a little disruption. The interviewer nodded, but it was clear that the public's perception of Tesla was still hanging in the balance. As the interview ended and Musk left the studio, he couldn't shake the feeling that this battle was far from over. But he had one thing the world didn't, a vision of what the future could be. And as long as he had breath in his body, he would keep fighting for that future. The media storm surrounding Elon Musk and Tesla was far from over. If anything, the courtroom victory had only intensified the spotlight on him, casting both his triumphs and shortcomings into the harsh light of public scrutiny. Headlines screamed across newspapers and screens, with pundits offering their opinions from every angle. Some saw him as a visionary genius, others as a reckless disruptor who had bitten off more than he could chew. While Musk's legal team worked tirelessly behind the scenes to ensure compliance with the new regulations, the public battle was being waged through the media. The tech world buzzed with conflicting narratives, and Musk had already taken steps to ensure that he wouldn't lose control of the narrative. One particular evening, Musk stood on the rooftop of Tesla's headquarters in Palo Alto, overlooking the city that had become synonymous with Silicon Valley's promise and peril. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the sprawling campus, but Musk wasn't thinking about the picturesque view. His mind was focused on the future, his vision of a sustainable world, powered by electric cars and revolutionary energy solutions. But it wasn't just about that anymore. It was about keeping Tesla, and his empire, alive in the face of overwhelming odds. He'd always been a believer in going against the grain, in challenging the status quo. But now, he faced not just regulatory roadblocks, but a war of perception. Tesla's autopilot, once hailed as a marvel of engineering, had become a lightning rod for criticism. Each crash, no matter how rare, was amplified by the media. The idea that Tesla was reckless in its approach to self-driving cars became a common narrative, feeding into fears about autonomous vehicles taking over the streets. Musk wasn't blind to the impact this had on the brand. While he couldn't control the opinions of others, he could shape the way Tesla responded. The pressure was beginning to feel suffocating. Musk knew that the public's perception of Tesla, and of him, could shift in an instant. If he let the media continue to frame the conversation in a negative light, he could lose everything. But it wasn't just about self-preservation. Musk genuinely believed that his companies were doing something world-changing. If he failed to fight back, progress itself would be under threat. Later that week, Musk sat in front of a camera for a live stream, prepared to speak directly to the public. There was no script. There were no pre-planned talking points. This was Musk, raw and unfiltered. "Let me make something clear," he began, his voice steady, but with an edge that came from years of defying expectations. "Tesla is not perfect. We're not claiming to be. But we are pushing the limits of what's possible. And if we get knocked down, we get back up and we keep pushing. We're not afraid to fail, because that's how we succeed. And if you want to stand in the way of progress, that's your choice. But know this, we will not stop." The words hit the internet like a shockwave. Fans and critics alike flooded social media with their responses. Many of his loyal supporters rallied behind him, claiming that Musk's defiance was exactly what the world needed to break free from outdated systems. They saw his boldness as a sign of leadership, someone who wouldn't buckle under pressure. But for others, it felt like Musk was alienating himself further, distancing himself from the regulators, the media, and the public who had once been his greatest supporters. The media, of course, jumped all over it. Articles spun the narrative in a variety of directions. Headlines ranged from "Musk doubles down on autopilot" to "Elon Musk, a man who can't be tamed." Some praised his unwavering stance, while others pointed to his recklessness and warned that his refusal to concede could lead to more accidents and more lawsuits. For Musk, the media frenzy was both exhausting and energizing. He had spent years in the public eye, constantly challenged by critics, but this felt different. The stakes were higher than ever before. It wasn't just about him anymore, it was about his legacy, the future of Tesla, and the future of electric cars and autonomous driving. As Tesla continued to make progress with its autopilot updates, the legal challenges didn't disappear. The Department of Transportation kept a close watch on the company's every move, and the lawsuits continued to pile up. Tesla had avoided an outright ban on its technology, but that didn't mean they were out of the woods. The threat of massive fines and further regulation loomed large. Musk's legal team worked overtime to comply with the conditions set by the court, but each new regulation felt like another layer of restriction that threatened to slow down the company's pace of innovation. Musk wasn't known for playing by the rules, but now, those rules seemed like a mountain he had to climb in order to keep moving forward. Meanwhile, the investors were getting nervous. Tesla's stock price had taken a dip in the wake of the trial, and shareholders were voicing concerns. They wanted results. They wanted Musk to keep pushing the envelope, but they also wanted assurance that Tesla wouldn't crash and burn in the process. It was a delicate balancing act, one that Musk had navigated before, but this time, it felt more precarious. He had to keep the dream alive, but he also had to prove that Tesla could weather the storm without losing its place in the market. And he knew that if he lost their confidence, everything could unravel. One afternoon, as Musk was preparing for another investor call, he received an unexpected message from the White House. It was a direct invitation to meet with President Natalie Diaz. She had been following the trial closely and wanted to discuss the future of autonomous vehicles and the role Tesla could play in that future. Musk wasn't sure what to expect. On one hand, he saw it as an opportunity to sway the government's stance and potentially ease some of the pressure Tesla was facing. On the other hand, he knew that any discussion with the White House could be fraught with political maneuvering and compromises. The next day, Musk walked into the Oval Office, ready for whatever conversation lay ahead. President Diaz greeted him with a handshake, her demeanor professional but friendly. "Elon, I've been following your case with Tesla closely," she said, her voice calm but direct. "I know you've got your critics, but I also know that you're pushing for a future that's different from anything we've seen. We need to make sure we're not stifling innovation, but we also need to balance that with public safety." Musk nodded. "I agree. And I think we can have both. But we can't let fear hold us back. Fear of failure, fear of new technology, it's what keeps us stuck in the past." President Diaz leaned forward, her eyes narrowing slightly. "So what's your plan, Elon? What will it take for us to move forward without putting people's lives at risk?" Musk took a deep breath. He'd fought battles before, but this one felt different. This was about more than just Tesla. This was about his vision for the future. "I'll tell you what it will take," he said. "It will take bold leadership, it will take regulation that doesn't stifle innovation, and it will take a commitment from all of us to not just imagine the future but to build it." The conversation that followed was intense, but Musk could sense that the president was listening. For the first time in a long time, he felt that he might just be able to make a difference, not just for Tesla, but for the future of autonomous vehicles, and perhaps, even for humanity's future on Earth and beyond. Elon Musk sat across from President Natalie Diaz, trying to read the subtle cues of her expression. Her office, bathed in the soft glow of daylight filtering through the tall windows, felt more like a place for negotiation than a seat of power. Musk had been in enough high-stakes situations to know how to approach a meeting like this, but this time, it felt different. This wasn't just about Tesla anymore, it was about something bigger. The White House meeting had been scheduled on short notice, after Musk's controversial remarks had dominated the news for days. Many had expected this to be an opportunity for the government to flex its muscles, remind Musk of his place, and make sure he understood that the rules still applied to him. But as the conversation unfolded, Musk felt a shift. The president wasn't just looking to challenge him, she was trying to understand him, and perhaps, make an alliance that could push both their goals forward. "So, Elon," President Diaz began, her tone diplomatic yet firm. "You've made it clear that Tesla's mission is about more than just electric cars. It's about a future of sustainable energy, a cleaner planet, and a world where humans can live beyond Earth. I get that. But where does that leave the people who are concerned about safety? Not just with autopilot technology, but with how quickly you're pushing all of this forward. Musk, ever the visionary, leaned forward, his elbows resting on the polished surface of the desk. I understand the concerns, he began, his voice steady, but passionate. Safety is crucial. We're not just designing cars, we're creating a system for the future. Yes, mistakes happen. But we can't stop because we're afraid of those mistakes. We have to learn from them and keep moving forward. People forget that the world was once afraid of airplanes. They were dangerous. But now, we fly across the world every day without a second thought. President Diaz raised an eyebrow. But we don't have the same level of trust with your technology. Autonomous vehicles are still in their infancy. The public isn't ready to place their trust in them. At least not without more oversight. Musk took a deep breath. He had expected this pushback. But now, he had to show not just his defiance, but his willingness to collaborate. He couldn't afford to be an island anymore. I don't expect people to blindly trust Tesla, he said. What I'm asking for is the opportunity to prove that we can get it right. If we're given the proper time, space, and support, we can make this work, not just for Tesla, but for the entire world. Think about the bigger picture. Think about what autonomous driving could do for transportation. Think about the energy solutions we're working on at Tesla. We're not just building cars, we're building the future of sustainable living. Diaz listened carefully. You're asking a lot of people to take a leap of faith, Elon. And that leap requires more than just your words. It requires a change in policy, it requires trust in your company, and it requires the government to be on your side. This isn't just about the technology. It's about public perception, regulation, and ensuring that we don't move too fast, too recklessly. Musk was ready for this. I get that. But speed is the essence of innovation. If we move too slowly, the future will pass us by. The entire planet could suffer from climate change. People will continue to be trapped in traffic, wasting time and energy. We need bold action now. And I'm willing to work with the government to make sure we do it the right way. The conversation stretched into hours. It wasn't a simple back and forth. There were moments of silence where both of them were clearly deep in thought, weighing their options. Diaz wasn't an easy person to convince, and Musk knew that. But as the discussion evolved, he began to sense that this wasn't just another political ploy. The president, despite her reservations, was genuinely interested in finding common ground. Perhaps, Musk realized, this was his chance to turn the tide, not just for Tesla, but for all his ventures. In the days following the meeting, things began to change. The White House released a statement signaling its support for Tesla's continued innovation, with a caveat. The government would provide Tesla with a clear path to advance its autonomous vehicle technology, but only under strict conditions. These included rigorous safety standards, periodic reviews, and full transparency from Tesla regarding its autopilot updates. The public reaction was mixed. Supporters of Musk hailed the agreement as a victory, a sign that the government was finally getting on board with the future of transportation. Critics, however, saw it as a compromise that didn't go far enough. They argued that it was still too soon to allow Tesla to continue on its current trajectory without more oversight. For Musk, the agreement was a step in the right direction, but it wasn't a win yet. The path ahead remained steep. Tesla was still under intense scrutiny, and every move would be watched carefully. But he wasn't discouraged. This was just another challenge, one that he was more than willing to face. Meanwhile, inside Tesla's headquarters, the mood had shifted. There was a renewed sense of purpose among the employees. The fear of an impending shutdown or stricter regulations had weighed heavily on the company, but with the government's acknowledgement, the team felt emboldened. They had a green light to continue developing their technology, but they also knew that the pressure to get it right had never been higher. Gwynne Shotwell, always the pragmatist, gathered the leadership team to discuss their next steps. We've got a window here, she said, looking around the room. The White House is on our side. The public is watching. We need to prove that we can meet the new safety standards while still pushing the envelope. This is the chance of a lifetime. But we have to be strategic. Musk, sitting at the head of the table, nodded. He could sense the shift in energy, too. The tension was still there, but it was mixed with a palpable sense of excitement. This was the moment Tesla had been working toward, the moment when they could prove that the future was not just possible, but inevitable. The world needs us to succeed, Musk said, his voice firm. We have to be the ones who get this right. It won't be easy, but it's never been about easy. It's about doing what others say can't be done. And we will do it. Together. Back in the media spotlight, Musk continued to double down on his defiant stance, maintaining that the future of autonomous vehicles was too important to allow fear to dictate progress. We are making history, he declared in a new interview. Tesla is not just a car company. It's a movement. But as the weeks went on, the spotlight became even brighter. Every time Musk made a public statement, every time Tesla released a new update on autopilot or energy solutions, the media dissected it. The risks, the rewards, the consequences, it was all laid bare for the world to see. As the company pressed forward, it became clear that Tesla's future was tied to more than just the success of its cars. It was tied to a larger vision, one that involved energy, sustainability, and perhaps even humanity's survival beyond Earth. The challenges ahead were immense, but Musk had never been one to shy away from them. The road to the future, Musk knew, was paved with uncertainty. But it was also paved with opportunity. And he was ready to seize it. After the meeting with President Natalie Diaz, Elon Musk's life entered a new phase. It wasn't a phase of peace or calm. Quite the opposite, it was a phase of constant public scrutiny, escalating media debates, and ever-increasing pressure. While the agreement with the White House had been hailed by many as a win for Tesla, it also became a lightning rod for criticism. For every advocate cheering on Musk's defiance, there were plenty of critics who saw the deal as a dangerous compromise, one that left the public vulnerable in the name of technological progress. The first signs of backlash came swiftly. It started on social media, where the debate surrounding Tesla's autopilot technology raged with fervor. Musk's critics, emboldened by the recent publicized crashes and the media's relentless coverage, rallied behind the argument that Tesla was racing ahead with dangerous, untested technology. They didn't believe that government intervention was enough. They wanted a halt to Tesla's rollout of autonomous vehicles altogether. They believed Musk was too willing to risk lives in his pursuit of innovation. Tesla's technology isn't ready, screamed one viral tweet. Why are we letting Musk gamble with people's lives? Is he so obsessed with fame and fortune that he's blind to the dangers? Another tweeted, linking to an article about a fatal autopilot crash. The hashtag Musk must stop began trending, pushing the debate into even more contentious territory. It wasn't just about the technology anymore, it was about Musk's character. Was he too reckless, too arrogant? Was he so focused on his vision of the future that he was willing to sacrifice human lives to get there? It wasn't an easy question to answer, and it sent shockwaves through the industry. Inside Tesla's headquarters, things weren't much better. Employees were seeing firsthand how the media storm was affecting the company's image. Investors, who had once been thrilled with the idea of revolutionary cars and space travel, were growing increasingly worried. Tesla's stock price, which had once been a symbol of Elon Musk's rising empire, had started to fall. The questions around the future of Tesla were no longer about whether the company could succeed, they were about whether it could survive the pressure. Gwynne Shotwell, Tesla's COO, had been preparing for the storm, but even she could see that this was different. The online criticism had now become a real-world issue. Journalists, regulatory bodies, and even consumers were questioning the ethics and practicality of the technology Tesla was so proud of. We have to control the narrative, Shotwell said in a tense meeting with Musk. The media is framing this as a race with safety, and the public is starting to believe it. If we don't do something to shift perceptions, we could lose everything. Musk leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, as he considered Shotwell's words. He knew this wasn't just about fighting legal battles or government regulations anymore. This was about winning back public trust. I've always been an advocate for transparency, Musk said, his voice thoughtful. Maybe it's time we open up our processes more. Show the world what we're doing to improve safety. We need to demonstrate, not just tell. Shotwell nodded. Exactly. If we can give the public insight into how we're developing this technology, perhaps we can change the conversation. But it has to be real. No fluff. No empty promises. Musk stared out of the window, watching the sun begin to set over Palo Alto. He wasn't sure how he felt about all the media and public outcry. On the one hand, he understood the concerns. The last thing he wanted was for anyone to get hurt due to a mistake made by his company. But on the other hand, the world couldn't afford to stop evolving. The stakes were too high, and Tesla was too close to realizing its potential. We'll double down on safety, Musk finally said. We'll invest in even more robust testing. We'll put out updates with complete transparency, showing exactly what we've done. No secrets. Shotwell smiled slightly. That's the spirit. But we'll need a clear PR strategy. And we'll need to be prepared for the backlash that's coming. There's no easy way out of this. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of media blitzes, statements, and high-stakes negotiations. Musk and his team worked tirelessly to address the concerns raised by the public. Tesla began releasing a series of in-depth videos and blog posts detailing the improvements they had made to autopilot technology. They highlighted the rigorous safety measures being implemented, including advanced AI algorithms designed to prevent accidents, new sensors to enhance vehicle perception, and regular software updates that improved the driving experience. One of the most notable moves came when Musk opened up Tesla's internal data, something he had always been reluctant to do in the past. In a live stream, Musk explained the extensive crash tests, data analytics, and real-world trials that Tesla had conducted to refine its autonomous driving systems. The live stream was a gamble. By showing this level of transparency, Musk risked making Tesla vulnerable to even more criticism, especially if the public found any flaws in the data. However, it worked. Public perception began to shift. For the first time in a while, the conversation wasn't just about the dangers of self-driving cars. It became about the steps Tesla was taking to improve safety. People began to see Musk and Tesla not as reckless pioneers, but as innovators who were trying to find the balance between progress and responsibility. Even the media started to take a more balanced approach. Reporters who had once slammed Musk for his arrogance began to acknowledge his willingness to engage with the public. While some remained skeptical, others admitted that Tesla was moving in the right direction, fast, but with the necessary caution. But the shift in public sentiment wasn't enough to silence all critics. Some continued to believe that Musk's boldness was a liability. Senator Lisa Torres, a vocal opponent of Tesla's autopilot technology, appeared on multiple news channels, doubling down on her call for tighter regulations. We cannot allow one man's obsession to jeopardize the safety of millions, she said in an interview. Tesla is a powerful company, but with power comes responsibility. Elon Musk's refusal to slow down and consider the risks is reckless, and we need to hold him accountable. Her words echoed across social media, reigniting the flames of controversy. Supporters of Musk were quick to counter, calling out Torres and others for their lack of understanding of innovation. But the battle for public opinion was far from over. Musk knew that even as he worked tirelessly to improve the technology, there would always be those who viewed him as a villain, someone too focused on the future to care about the present. Despite the ongoing struggle, Musk remained undeterred. He had faced criticism before, and he had always come out on top. But this time, the stakes were higher. Tesla's future, and his own legacy, were on the line. With a sense of resolve, Musk turned his attention to the next big hurdle. The fight for Tesla's future was far from over, but he had a plan. And he was ready to see it through. Elon Musk sat in the corner of a dimly lit conference room in Washington, D.C., his mind racing. He had just finished another round of meetings with government officials, regulatory bodies, and lobbyists. The pressure had never been greater. Tesla was at the forefront of technological innovation, but that didn't make the company immune to the tangled web of politics. If anything, it made them a prime target. Musk wasn't just dealing with critics in the media anymore, he was facing a full-blown political storm. It wasn't that the government didn't recognize Tesla's contributions. No, on the surface, there was a certain admiration for the groundbreaking work that Musk and his team had done. But at a deeper level, the situation was far more complicated. Musk's critics in the halls of power were growing louder, and many had their own political motivations. What was once a battle for innovation was quickly becoming a battle for influence, as Musk realized that his success had put him at odds with powerful interests. At the center of it all was Senator Lisa Torres, who had become one of the most vocal opponents of Musk's aggressive push toward autonomous vehicles. Torres, a staunch advocate for strict regulations in the tech sector, had made no secret of her belief that Tesla was moving too quickly, and she had the political weight to back it up. As a member of the Senate's Commerce Committee, Torres held a great deal of sway over the regulatory framework that would govern emerging technologies like Tesla's. Behind the scenes, Torres wasn't working alone. A coalition of lawmakers, many of whom were supported by traditional automotive industries, had begun to rally against Musk's vision. Their main argument, the lack of accountability and safety standards in the rapid rollout of autonomous vehicles. To them, Tesla was the wild card, a rogue player in an industry that, in their eyes, required more oversight. Musk knew that he had to act quickly to shift the narrative. Public opinion was one thing, but navigating the political landscape was an entirely different beast. His team had worked hard to build Tesla into a juggernaut, but now, Musk had to leverage everything he had, his network, his resources, and his reputation, to ensure that his company didn't get buried under the weight of bureaucratic regulation. Late one evening, Musk received an unexpected call. It was from President Natalie Diaz herself. "Elon," Diaz's voice came through the line, calm yet firm. "I need you to meet with me tomorrow. We've got a problem." Musk felt his pulse quicken. The president had been supportive, but with the political winds shifting, he knew that anything could happen. "What kind of problem?" he asked, keeping his tone even. "There's a push in Congress to introduce a new bill that would significantly tighten the regulations on autonomous driving technology," Diaz explained. "I can't promise anything, but I think you need to make your case directly to Congress. They're not just listening to us anymore, they're listening to the lobbyists. And that means you need to have a voice in the room." Musk's mind raced. He had known this day would come, but the reality of it hit hard. Congress, not just the public, was becoming the battleground. He didn't have the luxury of just talking to the media anymore. He had to convince lawmakers, some of whom were not exactly fans of his approach to disruption. "I'll be there," Musk replied, determination in his voice. "I'm not backing down. But I'll need more than just a seat at the table. I need allies." Diaz paused before speaking again. "I'll make a few calls. But understand this, Elon, the political landscape is changing. People are scared. They're not just worried about your technology, they're worried about the future of their own power. And that's something they're willing to fight for." Musk hung up the phone and stared out the window. The landscape was changing, and it wasn't just about technology anymore. It was about power, influence, and who could control the future. This wasn't just a battle for the self-driving car industry. This was a battle for the future of innovation itself. The following day, Musk flew to Washington, D.C. once again. This time, it wasn't for a meeting with the White House. It was for a high-stakes, closed-door session with key members of Congress. The room was full of familiar faces, some of them allies, others fierce opponents, but all of them wielding influence over the fate of Tesla's future. Musk entered the room, greeted with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. He could feel the weight of the room pressing in on him. He was not just a businessman here. He was the symbol of a disruptive force that could change the world. And with that power came responsibility, a responsibility he was beginning to understand was not just about the success of his company, but the potential impact on an entire industry, society, and even the future of governance. "Mr. Musk," began Senator Torres, her voice measured and cool, "thank you for joining us today. We've been following Tesla's progress, but there are growing concerns that your company is moving too fast with little regard for the safety and privacy of the American people. How do you respond to these concerns?" Musk leaned forward in his chair. "I understand the concerns. Safety is something we take incredibly seriously at Tesla. But we also have to recognize that we're at a crossroads. The technology we're developing has the potential to save lives, reduce emissions, and change the way people live. If we slow down too much, we risk losing these benefits. And let's not forget, the traditional automotive industry has been fighting this progress from day one. We need to be careful that fear doesn't stop us from moving forward." Torres shook her head. "That's all well and good, Elon, but you're talking about millions of people. We need concrete proof that your technology is safe before we allow it to be rolled out on such a massive scale. People have died in crashes. The technology is not foolproof. And frankly, it's hard to trust someone who seems more focused on launching rockets into space than ensuring the safety of everyday citizens." Musk didn't flinch. "I'll take full responsibility for any mistakes that happen under Tesla's watch," he said. "But let me make one thing clear, without bold innovation, we'll be stuck in a world that can't solve the problems we face: climate change, traffic fatalities, and energy shortages. If we wait for perfection, we will never get anywhere. The question is not whether we can do it perfectly, it's whether we are willing to try." The room grew quiet. There was a tension in the air, thick with the weight of history. Musk wasn't just selling a product, he was selling a future. And as much as Congress might want to control that future, they were starting to realize that they might not have all the power anymore. After the meeting, Musk walked out of the room, feeling both exhausted and energized. The battle was far from over. In fact, it had just begun. But he knew one thing for sure: the future would not wait. And neither would he. The atmosphere in the courtroom was tense, a stark contrast to the bustling streets of Washington, D.C. just outside. The case against Tesla, specifically regarding its autopilot technology, had grown into one of the most high-profile trials in recent memory. It wasn't just a case about technology, it had evolved into a battle for the future of innovation itself. On one side was Elon Musk, the visionary who had revolutionized electric cars and space exploration. On the other, a coalition of regulators, critics, and families of crash victims demanding accountability for the deaths and accidents that had occurred while using Tesla's autopilot feature. Musk sat at the defendant's table, flanked by his legal team, his expression calm, but his mind whirring with thoughts. This wasn't just any courtroom battle. It felt like the culmination of everything Tesla had done, or failed to do, in the public eye. He had faced public criticism, political pressure, and media backlash, but nothing compared to the weight of a courtroom, where every word spoken, every document submitted, would be scrutinized under a magnifying glass. It wasn't lost on Musk that this trial wasn't just about one accident. It was about the future of self-driving cars, about the very essence of what it meant to trust technology in our daily lives. The question now was whether the public would accept the risks, or whether the skepticism and fear that had been steadily growing would finally bring Tesla to its knees. The prosecutor, a seasoned lawyer named Daniel Crow, rose to present the case for the plaintiffs. His voice was measured but firm as he outlined the details of the tragic crashes that had involved Tesla vehicles with autopilot engaged. Each story was heart-wrenching. The families of the victims had been brought in as part of the emotional appeal. They had come forward, some with tear-filled eyes, others with a quiet anger, seeking justice for their lost loved ones. These accidents were not random, Crow argued, pacing before the jury. They were the direct result of a failure in the system, a failure that Elon Musk and Tesla ignored for too long. They touted their autopilot technology as a miracle of modern engineering, but in truth, it's nothing more than a dangerous gimmick, a half-baked solution that has cost lives. Musk listened intently, his face impassive. He wasn't the type to let emotion dictate his actions, but he couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. The weight of the loss and suffering was real. But he knew he couldn't let the critics cloud the bigger picture. He had always believed that progress required taking risks, but the price of those risks couldn't be ignored either. When it was his turn to speak, Musk stood, his tall frame making him an imposing figure before the jury. He addressed the court, not with arrogance, but with quiet conviction. Tesla has always prioritized safety, Musk said, his voice steady. Our technology is not perfect, but it is constantly improving. We are not afraid to take responsibility for the mistakes that have happened, but I believe in the promise of what we're building. The world cannot stop moving forward because we fear what might happen. We must take bold steps, and that sometimes means making mistakes. But every mistake, every failure, is an opportunity to learn and improve. The room was silent after his words, the weight of his statement hanging in the air. Musk knew this wasn't going to be an easy battle. His opponents were not just lawyers, they were people who had been personally affected by the flaws in Tesla's system. But Musk also knew that this trial, for all its gravity, wasn't the end of the road. It was a critical turning point, yes, but it wouldn't define Tesla's future. That would be up to him. As the trial progressed, Musk found himself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. The courtroom drama had been intense, but what struck him more than anything was the public's response. Every day, news outlets broadcast snippets of the trial, fueling the firestorm of controversy that surrounded him. Tesla was no longer just a company, it had become a symbol, a lightning rod for larger cultural debates about technology, power, and responsibility. Some of Musk's fiercest critics saw the trial as their opportunity to bring down the titan of Silicon Valley. Senator Lisa Torres, still an outspoken opponent of Musk's autonomy push, was on the warpath once again, making impassioned speeches about the dangers of unregulated tech companies. We cannot continue to let companies like Tesla put profits over people's lives, Torres had said in a public interview. This trial is just the beginning. We will make sure that Tesla, and every other company pushing autonomous technology, is held accountable. Her words echoed across the political landscape. The rhetoric from lawmakers and activists only intensified, with calls for stricter regulations growing louder. The public's opinion seemed to be shifting once more, with more and more people voicing concern over the safety of self-driving cars, even if they had previously been Tesla supporters. Yet, despite the mounting pressure, Musk remained resolute. He knew this was part of the process. Every breakthrough, every new frontier, came with opposition. But he also knew that if Tesla could weather this storm, the company would emerge stronger than ever. The key, he realized, wasn't just about surviving the trial, it was about surviving the court of public opinion. The turning point came when Tesla's defense team introduced new evidence, a comprehensive report outlining the advancements made in autopilot safety. They presented data showing that Tesla's self-driving cars were involved in far fewer accidents compared to traditional vehicles. Moreover, the latest updates to Tesla's software had significantly reduced the likelihood of crashes. The data was clear and compelling, and for the first time in the trial, the tide seemed to shift in Tesla's favor. Musk seized on the opportunity to push back against the accusations. The reality is, he told the jury, that every life lost is a tragedy. But we cannot ignore the fact that autonomous technology has the potential to save lives in the long run. We're not just creating cars, we're creating a safer future for everyone. The jury seemed to take note of Musk's arguments. While they weren't ready to make their final verdict, they couldn't deny the progress Tesla had made in improving its technology. As the trial drew to a close, Musk found himself waiting for the final decision. The media continued to scrutinize every move, every statement, as though the fate of the world depended on the outcome of this one trial. The pressure was immense, but Musk had been through worse. For now, all he could do was wait. The next few days would determine not just Tesla's future, but his own legacy as an innovator and disruptor. The courtroom was silent, every eye trained on the judge as he prepared to deliver the final verdict in one of the most highly anticipated trials of the century. The tension in the room was palpable. Elon Musk sat at the defendant's table, his usually confident posture slightly stiff, as if the weight of the moment had finally caught up with him. This wasn't just a court case, it was the culmination of years of effort, battles fought on every front, and a defining moment for Tesla, his legacy, and the future of autonomous technology. The prosecution and defense had made their arguments. The jury, a group of men and women who had been carefully selected, had deliberated for days, sifting through the testimony, the evidence, and the emotional toll of the trial. Musk had spoken from the heart, his words often met with skepticism and doubt, but he knew that in these moments, he had to remain calm. The world was watching, and whatever happened next would shape his company, and his life, forever. Judge Daniel Harper, a figure known for his no-nonsense approach to the law, stood up from his seat. He looked at the jury and then turned to face the courtroom. Members of the jury, Judge Harper began, his voice measured and stern, this is a case that has drawn not only national but international attention. It deals with the balance between innovation and safety, progress and responsibility. As a society, we must ask ourselves whether the benefits of Tesla's technology outweigh the potential risks. And we must also consider whether the company, under the leadership of Elon Musk, took adequate steps to protect the public. Musk's heart raced. He had heard these words countless times, but hearing them from the bench, from a man who had the power to change everything, made them feel real in a way that nothing else had. The judge continued, outlining the various points of the case. The prosecution had focused heavily on the accidents and the consequences of Tesla's autopilot system, accusing Musk of negligence and pushing a product to market without sufficient safeguards. The defense, on the other hand, had argued that Tesla's autopilot technology was revolutionary, and that the company had done everything in its power to improve safety and transparency. They had shown the advancements Tesla had made in software updates, crash avoidance, and continuous monitoring. Ultimately, it came down to the question of accountability. Could Musk and Tesla be held responsible for the mistakes that had occurred, even when they were actively working to improve the technology? Or were they simply victims of an overzealous regulatory system trying to keep pace with an industry that was advancing faster than anyone could have predicted? After what felt like an eternity, Judge Harper spoke again. Based on the evidence presented, he said slowly, this court finds that while Tesla's autopilot system has indeed been involved in accidents, the company has demonstrated a commitment to safety. The failures that occurred were tragic, but they were also part of an industry-wide issue that involves multiple players, government agencies, automakers, and technology companies alike. Tesla cannot be held solely responsible for these incidents, especially when the company has taken significant steps to improve its technology in the years since. There was a collective breath of relief from Musk's side of the courtroom, though it was short-lived. The judge wasn't done. However, Judge Harper continued, Tesla must be held accountable for its lack of transparency in communicating the limitations of its autopilot system to consumers. While the technology has shown promise, the company failed to adequately inform its customers about the risks involved. This, in part, led to the confusion and tragic consequences that were highlighted in this trial. As a result, Tesla will be required to pay restitution to the families of the victims, and the company must commit to implementing more rigorous safety measures moving forward. Musk's chest tightened as the words hung in the air. It wasn't a complete victory, but it wasn't a defeat either. Tesla had been found partially liable, but the ruling acknowledged the company's efforts to improve its technology and didn't place the entire blame on Musk's shoulders. Outside the courthouse, the media frenzy was already in full swing. Reporters rushed to speak with those involved, and the news outlets immediately began running headlines. The ruling was a mixed bag, but one thing was clear, the debate about the future of autonomous vehicles was far from over. For Musk, the relief was tempered by the understanding that the fight for the future wasn't over. This verdict wouldn't end the controversy. In fact, it was likely to spark more questions about the role of government in regulating emerging technologies. The jury had spoken, but the court of public opinion would continue to weigh in for years to come. Later that evening, Musk sat in his office at Tesla's headquarters in Palo Alto, staring out at the skyline. It had been a long, grueling day, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was just beginning. He had won in the courtroom, yes, but the road ahead was still uncertain. The public's perception of Tesla, of him, would continue to evolve as the company worked to prove that it was more than just a pioneer in autonomous driving, it was a leader in safety, sustainability, and innovation. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. It was his chief counsel, Nathan Clark, holding a tablet in his hands. "Elon," Nathan said, "there's something you need to see." Musk raised an eyebrow and motioned for him to come in. Nathan sat down and handed Musk the tablet, which displayed a video of the courtroom verdict being broadcast live. As Musk watched the news anchor's voice narrate the ruling, he couldn't help but notice the underlying tension in the air. The anchor was interviewing a political analyst, who was already speculating about the future of Tesla, predicting that the ruling would only lead to stricter regulations and more scrutiny for the company. Musk leaned back in his chair, deep in thought. This was just the beginning. The world was watching. Tesla had made it through one storm, but many more were coming. The phone on his desk buzzed, interrupting his thoughts. It was a text message from President Natalie Diaz. "Elon, good news in the court today. But don't get too comfortable. The battle is only shifting to a different front now. You've got allies in Washington, but the fight for autonomy is far from over. The next phase will determine everything." Musk looked at the message, letting out a soft breath. He had always known that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But this was the moment. This was the challenge he had always thrived on. And if history had taught him anything, it was that nothing worth doing was ever easy. He texted back. "Ready for the next phase. Let's change the world." The courtroom drama was behind him, but for Elon Musk, the real work was just beginning. In the weeks following the trial, Tesla's stock price took an unexpected dip, reflecting the uncertainty that lingered in the public's mind. Critics remained vocal, questioning whether Musk's vision for the future was too ambitious, too reckless. Yet, in the face of adversity, Musk remained unshaken. He had always believed that true innovation came with risks, and the road to the future was never meant to be easy. Back at Tesla's headquarters in Palo Alto, Musk was hard at work, not just on restoring the company's image but on advancing the very technology that had been put under the microscope during the trial. The verdict had given Tesla a second chance, but Musk knew that to truly lead the charge in autonomous driving, he needed to shift the narrative. This wasn't about defending past mistakes, it was about proving that Tesla could rise from the ashes and redefine the future of transportation. It was early morning when Musk gathered his team in the sleek, modern conference room at Tesla's headquarters. The mood was serious, yet there was a palpable sense of optimism in the air. They had faced setbacks before, but they had never been this close to breaking through the next frontier of technology. "Okay, everyone," Musk began, his voice steady but filled with intensity, "the trial is over, but the real work starts now. We've got the resources, the talent, and the momentum. But we need to prove that Tesla isn't just a car company. We're a movement. We're shaping the future of autonomous driving, and we can't let this trial define us. It's time to lead, not just in innovation, but in safety and transparency." Musk's words were met with nods of agreement. His team had always been willing to follow him through thick and thin, but they knew that this was a pivotal moment in Tesla's history. They had to act quickly, decisively, and with an eye on the long-term vision. "We're going to double down on our safety protocols," Musk continued. "We need to build trust with the public. That means not just focusing on the tech itself but also on how we communicate it. People need to understand the full capabilities, and limitations, of our autopilot system." Musk's focus shifted to the broader industry. He knew that for Tesla to succeed, it wasn't enough to just be a leader in technology. The company needed to bring everyone on board. He had already begun working behind the scenes with lawmakers and regulators to push for a more cohesive set of standards for autonomous vehicles. It was time for Tesla to stop being a lone wolf in the field and to set the pace for the entire industry. In the following months, Tesla launched a groundbreaking initiative, a public transparency campaign. Musk made himself available for interviews, where he openly discussed the flaws in Tesla's technology and the steps the company was taking to correct them. He took full responsibility for the mistakes of the past but also made it clear that Tesla's commitment to improvement was unwavering. Alongside this, Tesla released detailed safety data and invited the public to see firsthand how the company's autopilot system worked, and where it still had room to grow. The public response was mixed at first, but over time, Musk's honesty began to win over many skeptics. People saw that Tesla wasn't hiding from its problems but instead tackling them head-on. And for those who remained unconvinced, Musk had a new weapon: results. With every software update, Tesla's autopilot system improved. The frequency of accidents involving the technology dropped significantly, and Musk made sure to highlight these successes in the media. He knew that for the skeptics to truly come around, they needed to see hard evidence, not just words. One of the most significant milestones came when Tesla announced that it had achieved a major breakthrough in autonomous driving technology, a fully self-driving car with no human intervention required. For years, autonomous driving had been seen as a distant dream. But now, thanks to Tesla's relentless pursuit of perfection, that dream was within reach. Musk couldn't contain his excitement as he stood on stage at the company's annual shareholder meeting to unveil the new development. The audience erupted into applause as Musk took the microphone, his usual calm demeanor replaced with an infectious energy. "We've been working on this for years," he said, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "And today, I'm proud to say that we've crossed the finish line. This is not just a step forward for Tesla, it's a leap for humanity. This is the future of transportation, and we're ready to lead the way." The announcement sent shockwaves through the industry. Competitors scrambled to catch up, and regulators took note of the safety protocols Tesla had implemented to ensure that the self-driving cars were as secure as possible. The conversation surrounding autonomous driving shifted from skepticism to cautious optimism. But for Musk, this achievement wasn't the end, it was just another milestone. He knew that the real challenge lay in integrating autonomous vehicles into society and ensuring that they became the norm rather than the exception. There would be hurdles, undoubtedly. But Musk had always believed that overcoming adversity was the key to creating lasting change. As the months turned into years, Tesla continued to push the boundaries of what was possible. The company expanded its reach, not just in the electric car market, but into energy storage, solar power, and beyond. The world was changing, and Musk had become a central figure in that transformation. But for all the progress Tesla had made, there were still those who questioned Musk's vision, who doubted whether he could truly change the world. But Musk didn't mind. He had always known that changing the world was never going to be easy. The path forward would always be filled with challenges, but it was a path worth taking. And in the end, that's what Musk had built, not just a company, but a movement. A movement that was redefining transportation, reshaping energy, and proving that even the boldest dreams could come true. Tesla had weathered the storm, and in doing so, it had secured its place in history. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?